Hello and welcome. Today I'm in the new Tier 6 French destroyer, the
Aigle.
and this should be her final form, which means that this is what she should end up being like in the game, and I find her to be quite fun and engaging. Well, that's kinda all I wanted to say about her. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I would like to thank the... Okay, jokes aside, I do find that the Aigle is a fairly fun ship. In fact, some of the stats make me scratch my head a little bit. You see, she is a tier 6 destroyer, but she feels quite strong, at least stats-wise. I haven't really had any real games that put her much to the test. I'll go over the full stats in the port later on, so at the end of the video. But I'll go over some of them, the most important parts. You see, she has interesting guns that are fairly good. They're not as floaty as US destroyer guns, and she has a lot of range on those guns. She has 17,000 HP as a destroyer, which is a really high amount because, again, she's tier 6. She gets guns that are 139mm caliber that deal 2000 HE alpha, have 12% fire chance, although that is with Demolition Expert and the flag, so it should be 9% without those two. And she has 4.8 second reload with 5 guns. So in that kind of sense, she feels already like a strong gunboat as far as destroyers are concerned. Then you look at her torpedoes and you find that they are 7 kilometer. They go 7 kilometers, they have 1.2 kilometer concealment, and they go 57 knots. But the interesting thing is that they deal 18,400 damage, or 600, I'm not sure, probably 400. Which means that those torpedoes hurt a massive amount at tier 6. I mean, think about it, she already has 17,000 HP. A Nuremberg has 27,000 HP at the same tier. I guess her one weakness, no actually two weaknesses, but her one weakness is that she doesn't have anti-air. Yes, there are anti-air guns firing, but they deal like a combined 15 damage or something like that. Okay, so I was afraid of being torpedoed, which I am, but I feel like I'm still gonna get hit by one of these. Yeah, unfortunately, it clipped my ship for a good 9k damage. But I'm still okay, and I still have speed boost, and I'm gonna be able to torpedo some battleships now. Now, my concealment is 6.8 kilometers, so that is not actually that great. You see, you can't really stealth torpedo unless the opponents are coming towards you. However, the ship is really fast because she has, well, she goes 36 knots without the speed flag, and she has a French cruiser speed boost, which gives her plus 20% speed. And this is actually quite significant because you get up to 43.2 knots without the speed flag and 45 knots with a speed flag. So, yeah, this ship is fast. You basically can pretend to be a Leningrad with better turret traverse. Although the shells, I think they're slightly more floaty, but I haven't actually tested it. For some reason, this port stats tell that her shell initial velocity is really slow, but you know, it doesn't really feel that bad. I mean, I'm 9 kilometers away and I don't need to lead that much to hit this battleship. Her smoke is on the weaker side, not as weak as the German smoke, but it's only like 4 seconds better or something like that. So in that kind of sense, you know, you're not that much better off. So I suppose that might be a slight weakness. Now, the main weakness I would mention is that she has... her gun firing arcs aren't that great. You can't bring all the guns to bear, but you can usually still bring 4 or 3 at least, when you're like doing normal maneuvers. However, of course, the arcs aren't quite as bad as the Cossack. Okay, so these torpedoes, both of these launchers are gonna be aimed at the Queen Elizabeth. You see, I looked at the minimap, and I saw that there was a Gede over there. So I expect the Queen Elizabeth to turn away. The Giulio is going to, you know, go down to the fire, but the Queen Elizabeth is healthy still, right? So I expect her to turn away because, you know, you don't want to run into 2 destroyers, especially when they're in a crossfire. And meanwhile, I will keep shelling them with HE. However, the Queen Elizabeth has I want to say exceeded my expectations, but actually it's more like disappointed my expectations. And she turned in instead of away, which is kind of a crazy thing to do, because basically she's planning to fight 2 destroyers alone. Which I guess saved her neck there on my torpedoes, not on the Geddes torpedoes though. Yeah, this is kind of why I expected her to turn away. Because, you know, those Geddes torpedoes weren't quite nice to her. She has used her damage control party, so now we'll just do a follow-up with the guns, and I'll launch my torpedoes too. She probably should turn towards me. If you look at where her guns are pointing, you should realize that it's gonna be really difficult for her to really shoot me, because it'll take quite a while for those guns to properly turn around. And meanwhile, I will put some distance between me and her, plus get some range. Oh yeah, by the way, range as well. She has like 12.8 kilometer range without any kind of things that give her range. With advanced firing training, I literally have 15.3 kilometer range. And I think one of the torpedoes is gonna clip her and take her out, but just in case I'll fire a few more shots to make sure. And that's her gone. So this destroyer feels like a good gunboat, and you know, she has those torpedoes to defend herself as well with. And she doesn't seem to have any massive weaknesses. By the way, if you're wondering, like, in terms of a game, I didn't really have any great games. Because it seemed either our team won really quickly or the enemy team just won really quickly as well. And there just wasn't much I could do to change it. As you can see, you can still fire and get decently close with long range shots, but you know, you have to practice the same quite a bit. And I haven't done so recently, so I'm really bad at it. But eventually, I'm sure I'll eventually be able to hit that Graf Spee with some... Oh, there it is. I finally hit her. But yeah, I didn't really have any great games. I think this was one of the better ones I had. The results are really good in this one. Usually it was slightly worse, but in terms of gameplay, it didn't change that significantly. Like, I just did my thing, just shelled from afar. I suppose the biggest annoyance on this ship is that, well, she's tier 6, and unfortunately this means that you're gonna have some really bad matchmaking, because you'll often get into tier 8 matches, which is fine for you, considering the numbers on the ship. But the downside is that it seems that if you get into the lower tier matches, sometimes the games are just really boring. And well, there's the game. It was like a 10-minute match and a victory, but I did 100k damage, so I figured, you know, I would share this with you guys. I sunk 3 ships. Those battleships were basically asking for it by just doing what they did, rushing a destroyer that had smoke and all that without much cover. XP wise, I didn't do all that much compared to like the New Mexico 1700. I only got 1324. But I suppose it was a tier 5 game after all, and I was top tier. And here's the damage what I did. Most of it is through fires, 43,000 from fire, 39,500 from HE. And some torpedo damage. And here's the credits. I find her to be quite fun. Let's take a look at the Aigle in port. I think she looks quite nice. Well, she does look a bit like a destroyer does, you know, because, well, she is a destroyer after all. Well, stats-wise, she is really healthy, like mentioned earlier, 17,000 HP. This is without survivability expert, so with that, you can get to like 19,000, I believe. Armor we'll look at later. Guns-wise, she has 139mm caliber guns, which is the top limit for destroyer guns. 4.8 second reload, 2000 HE alpha damage, 12% fire chance, but this fire chance is with demolition expert and both of the fire chance flags. She does have 15.3 kilometer range here, but this is with advanced firing training. As you can see, the shell initial velocity seemed quite slow, but they didn't feel that as floaty as US destroyer guns, but that might just be, you know, that might just be confirmation bias. Torpedoes are 6 torpedoes, 2x3, 7 kilometer range, 57 knots, 1.2 kilometer detectability, so they're decently stealthy, not quite as good as they could be, but pretty okay. But they deal 18,400 damage, so they will put out a huge amount of damage. AA defense is basically non-existent. She has 2 DPS, 3 DPS, 14, and 5. In other words, anti-air is basically non-existent. Maneuverability, 36 knots, 680 meter turning circle, and 3.3 second rudder shift. But this 3.3 second is with the upgrade that reduces rudder shift time. And this is without the speed flag. Concealment, 6.8 kilometers. This is with Concealment Expert and 3.9 air detectability. Okay, so let's take a look at the smoke screen. It lasts for 81 seconds, which is slightly longer than German smoke, I believe. Otherwise, it's normal. And the speed boost is a bit special. It is 20% like French cruisers, so the speed boost is quite a big hit. The 36 knots becomes 43.2 knots, and if you add the speed flag on top of that, you get to 45 knots, which makes the ship really, really fast with the engine boost active. Lasts for 180 seconds, although I believe this might be with my engine boost modification upgrade. Not 100% certain, maybe that shows the default value. I use aiming systems modification because anti-air is useless. The smoke generator will give you only extra 2 seconds, and you don't really need the, turret traverse, because your turret traverse already is at 20 seconds, but this is with expert marksman, I believe. And I go with steering gears because without that, rudder shift is like 4.1 seconds, which makes it slightly slower than I would like on a destroyer. Captain skill-wise, this is just to show the stats. This is my French cruiser captain, so it has expert marksman, advanced firing training. I don't recommend advanced firing training on this ship. I think basic firing training would actually be better, because it would, apply to the damage output. But I'm not 100% certain what kind of loadout you would like on the captain on the ship. Okay, let's take a look at the armor now. 16 millimeters, 16, and 16, and the deck seems to be 16 as well. Superstructure is 10. Gun armor is 3 millimeters, but I think that's kind of normal on a destroyer. Now, there's one thing I would like to mention. When we look at all these stats, they seem pretty decent, right? But remember, this is a tier 6 destroyer. I think for a tier 6 destroyer, many of these stats are really, really good. This is like 12.8 kilometer range without advanced firing training, and 17,000 HP. And torpedoes that deal 18,000 damage, and the HE shells have a 4.8 second reload with 2,000 damage output with that kind of fire chance. The destroyer feels quite strong in, when you look at these kinds of stats, because she just, I don't know, the stats just feel really, really good. Anyways, that's kinda it. Yeah, I kinda like the ship, and this seems like it's going to be her final form. I suppose the only real downside is the concealment. But then again, considering your speed, you can kinda play her like a Leningrad more or less, except you're a tier lower. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would like to thank the patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much for your continued support, and no clear sky, and I hope I'll see you guys next time.